Hello, this is Dr. Hamilton, and this is my PowerPoint summary of The Tragedy of Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. So, the action in Julius Caesar begins with a celebration by the common people who've taken the day off in order to celebrate Julius Caesar's conquest of Rome. So if that sounds strange to you, it should, because Julius Caesar declared a civil war against Pompey, with whom he had a power-sharing agreement, and he won that civil war and defeated Pompey. But Pompey was allied with the nobles who had held power ancestrally for 600 years in the country, and so the nobles were still outraged on behalf of Pompey, and when they see this celebration, the nobles become angry. They regard Caesar as a traitor who has defeated their ally Pompey in a bloody civil war, even though they finally did agree to give him the power of emperor. They were still not happy. It was not they were forced to, because Caesar won the civil war. And so they take out their frustration and anger on these common people who are celebrating Caesar's triumph. And of course, this celebration also shows that Julius Caesar was very popular with the general public. But here is this noble screaming at the common people, and he says, "You blocks, you stones, you worse than senseless things, oh, you hard hearts, you cruel men of Rome, knew you not Pompey?" And so again, he's yelling at them because he's saying, you were cheering for Pompey before, and now that Pompey's been defeated in a civil war, now you love Julius Caesar. Well, Julius Caesar was Pompey's enemy. How could you possibly love Julius Caesar? And yet they do. And later on, we will find out that these same nobles who had been screaming at the common people and taking down these flowers and decorations on Julius Caesar's statues are put to silence, which I would assume means that they're put to death. So these very powerful nobles are still not as powerful as Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar, we have the action moves to the capital. Julius Caesar is warned by a soothsayer and that he is in danger. And Julius Caesar dismisses this soothsayer and calls him a dreamer. So this is the one of many, many warnings that Julius Caesar receives, that he is in danger. When he is in the capital, he observes Cassius, a very, very powerful noble who has a lean and hungry look. He thinks too much. Such men are dangerous. And you can see Cassius here is in the foreground. He's the one that's closest to us. And you can see that look of ambition. And we talked about how Cassius is deeply ambitious. He's corrupt. And he's also envious of Julius Caesar. And so he is the instigator of a conspiracy against Julius Caesar, but he is not really a good guy. Julius Caesar recognizes the danger of this man. So Cassius attempts to persuade Brutus to join the conspiracy. He needs Brutus. Brutus is well respected. He has a reputation for honesty and integrity that is well earned. And here we see Cassius, this is from another production, Cassius behind Brutus, tempting him to join in his conspiracy. And he first tells him, he tries this attack first. He tries this attempt at persuasion first. "Tell me, good Brutus, can you see your face?" And Brutus responds, "Into what dangers would you lead me, Cassius, that you would have me seek into myself for that which is not in me?" So, can you see your face? Cassius initially attempts to persuade Brutus by appealing to his vanity, appealing to his ego. Can you see your face? You know, your face is just as noble and respectable as Julius Caesar's. In fact, people respect you more. so you could be the ultimate leader. This is ultimately not persuasive to Brutus, who is not an egotist. He only wants the good of Rome. And so Cassius needs to change his method of persuasion to try to persuade Brutus that that Julius Caesar is someone to fear. So he says, "What trash is Rome? What rubbish and what awful when it serves for the base manner to illuminate so vile a thing as Caesar." So here he's imagining that Rome is just a pile of garbage that is lighting up this vile thing, Julius Caesar. So Rome then becomes rubbish, like just a dumpster fire, a heap of garbage that is lit on fire to illuminate this this disgusting figure of Julius Caesar. And he goes on to say that the Romans are really just like that. Caesar could not rise to power if the Romans were not slaves. And this is his contempt for Julius Caesar. He thinks that if the Romans, meaning the Roman nobles and the citizens, were less servile, were less cowardly, then they would not allow one man to dominate over them. They would be proud and they would assert their rights. So this is an argument that has more weight with Brutus. And he says, Cassius says, "Why, man, he doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep about to find ourselves dishonorable graves." So if you were wondering what a colossus is, this is what a colossus is in the picture. It is a giant, giant statue. And Cassius here is picturing Julius Caesar like this absolute giant. Now, this, of course, is what Brutus fears, that one man will rule Rome, not because Brutus wants to rule, but because he wants to uphold the Roman Republic, which has lasted for 600 years up until that time. And in the Roman Republic, they did not have one emperor, one king. They had a power-sharing agreement that they had a nascent democracy, an incipient democracy. Some of the forms of democracy. It was not really a democracy. If you could only hold power if you were a noble and came from a very wealthy family who had whose ancestors had held power. But nonetheless, it was a power sharing agreement. It was not that observed some of the forms of democracy, of what we regard as democracy. And so this argument that Caesar is going to rule as one man does have some weight with Brutus. He thinks, my family has rights as well. We are an old and powerful family, and so we don't want one man to rule in Rome. So Brutus goes home and he is deeply troubled. In his soliloquy, Brutus says of Caesar that he may be dangerous later on, and he says this, "And therefore think him as a serpent's egg, which hatched would as his kind grow mischievous and kill him in the shell." In other words, he's saying Julius Caesar has not shown as of yet that he's going to be a tyrant. He's been fair to me, but the situation that he's in is such that his power is growing, and he doesn't trust that, in a year from now, he will not become too big to manage. And so he's like a serpent that is in an egg, or a snake in an egg, and he thinks that you should kill him before he grows into a great tyrant. So Brutus receives notes thrown in at his window asking him to defend Rome, saying, "Speak, strike, redress." In other words, these notes are saying, defend Rome. We know that the notes actually come from Cassius. Cassius is ordering these notes to be written, to be thrown in at Brutus's window, but he doesn't know that. He thinks that these are notes from common members of the public telling him to defend Rome. And so he thinks that this, he's led to believe through Cassius's machinations that this assassination might be popular. So Brutus, we know, worries in his soliloquy, which of course we also know gives his inner thoughts, his honest inner thoughts, that Caesar would be crowned. How that might change his nature, there's the question. Again, it's not even just that he would be crowned. We know that in Rome, they did not have kings. They drove out their last king, Tarquin, 600 years before, so they did not have a tradition of kings. And so the question is, how would being crowned change Julius Caesar's nature? We know that he's refused the crown before, but it's important to remember that when Julius Caesar is finally tempted to go to the Capitol, he is the conspirators tell him that the senators will crown him, and they might change their mind later if he doesn't go to the Capitol now. And that is one of the reasons why he goes to the Capitol, or we're to assume it is. Now, we never see Julius Caesar crowned, but we know that at least he was tempted. So Brutus's beliefs about Julius Caesar wanting absolute power are not unfounded, but we don't know for certain. The conspirators arrive at Brutus's house at night to plot the assassination. Now, the conspirators arrive at night. This is when Brutus is alone. They come in hoods. And Brutus argues that the conspirators should not kill Marc Antony, Julius Caesar's best friend. He wants this to be not like an assassination, but like an execution. And he makes an argument that they are only against the spirit of Julius Caesar, but unfortunately that spirit is embodied in a man, and Julius Caesar must bleed for it. So they agree that Julius Caesar is to be killed and that Marc Antony is to be spared, but sparing Marc Antony will be a big, big mistake, because Marc Antony is a charismatic leader, and he is going to give an inflammatory funeral speech. Julius Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, before he goes to the Capitol, has a terrible dream, and this almost changes Julius Caesar's mind. Her dream is that Caesar's statue did with 100 spouts run pure blood, and many lusty Romans came smiling and did bathe their hands in it. So her dream is that that Julius Caesar's statue was spouting blood and the Romans were coming to bathe their hands, and she uses this to predict that if he goes to the Capitol, then a disaster will happen. However, Decius, who has come, he is one of the conspirators, and he's come to persuade Julius Caesar, easily convinces him to come, and he appeals to Caesar's pride, which is, of course, his tragic flaw. If Caesar hide himself, shall they not whisper, "Lo, Caesar is afraid"? Caesar is afraid. So, of course, Caesar cannot tolerate being afraid, being thought to be afraid. He is shamed into going to the Capitol, and he says, how silly, are your fears, Calpurnia, and of course her fears are quite real. At the Capitol, the conspirators beg for the freedom of their friend Publius Cimber, who is exiled. And so this is their excuse to get close to Caesar. They get on their knees to beg him for freedom for their friend who is in exile. And this is where Julius Caesar makes a very crucial speech. He says, I could be well moved if I were as you. In other words, I could have pity if I were a normal person like you. I don't really have human feelings, though, is basically what he's saying. And this is where he really does, the question about whether or not he's an egomaniac, whether or not he's grandiose, um, and whether or not Brutus is right that he's becoming too much like a god and less like a human leader is really it's really worried here. I mean, because he makes these grandiose claims. Does that mean that he would be the kind of leader that Brutus fears? I don't know that Shakespeare is saying that, but he certainly is incredibly grandiose here. But he is constant as the northern star, whose true fixed and resting quality there is no fellow, from whose true fixed and resting quality there is no fellow in the firmament. In other words, there's no one who is like Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar is then stabbed to death by the conspirators at the moment that he confirms their worst fears about him, so that's convenient for them. Marc Antony then makes a deal with the conspirators, and this is really important. Marc Antony is Julius Caesar's friend, but he makes a deal with the conspirators, and we have to understand why it is that Marc Antony makes this deal with the conspirators. And he agrees then to give a speech at Caesar's funeral, honoring him but not blaming the conspirators. So they will show a unified government, and he will go along with the conspirators' idea, which is to make Julius Caesar basically make this seem like an execution as opposed to an assassination. However, Marc Antony is horrified by Julius Caesar's dead body. He asks Julius Caesar's body for forgiveness, that he is meek and gentle with these butchers, and resolves on revenge. Brutus gives a funeral speech appealing to the love of country and reason of the Roman Republic. He says, "It is not because I loved Julius Caesar less, but because I loved my country more." And he gives a very coldly reasoned argument that if you love your country, if you love the Roman Republic, you would not want to have a tyrant ruling over you. You cannot possibly want to have one man ruling over you if you love the Roman Republic. And at the very end, he says that he holds up a dagger and says that he will give his own life to his country if his country needs it. And the public's cries, "Live, Brutus, live!" And so Brutus is persuasive at that point. But then Marc Antony comes and gives his speech based upon emotion. In Aristotle's terms, this is pathos, and of course reason is logos. And that paints Julius Caesar as a friend who is humble and totally unlike the grandiose emperor that we have just seen. So we just saw Julius Caesar saying, "I'm not like other men. I am constant as the northern star." And he can't have pity like other men. But now Marc Antony is telling us that he's just like everybody's best friend, And when the poor have cried, Caesar has wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff, and so on. And then Marc Antony comes down from the pulpit to be on level with the Roman public, to say that he is just like them. And then he asks the people to make a circle around the body of Caesar. He speaks to them on eye level, and he then depicts the conspirators as people who look down on the public in Rome. They're just these nobles who have contempt for you, whereas Julius Caesar was one of the people, a man of the people. And of course, this is laughable. Julius Caesar is a great, great general and a great figure, but the Caesar that we see depicted in Shakespeare's play is certainly not a man of the people. He was a popular leader, and historically, but the Caesar that Shakespeare depicts is a man who is very grandiose. And so Marc Antony really gaslights the Roman public in the sense that he tells them the opposite of what the truth is, and it's certainly a truth that we ourselves have just experienced. Marc Antony's speech inflames the Roman public into an angry mob and starts a civil war. And so Marc Antony, who has seized the opportunity that the conspirators have given him to give this speech, and he uses it politically in order to start a civil war. And of course, this furthers Marc Antony's own political ambitions to become one of the great figures who shares power in Rome after the Civil War. And so this is where we are in the play at this point. And so I will be giving this would be part one, but this is the action in the play and the plot in the play up until the point where we are right now. Okay, thanks everybody, and we will speak soon.